everyone. Nice meeting you all again. Be safe, take healthy food, and don't waste food. Well, today we are going to go inside about your CPU. Again, I'm telling you, I'm not going to go inside any architecture or practically how to remove. I'm going to go externally how to look into the CPU which is installed in your system and what type of CPU you have to replace if you have any issue in your CPU. So how do we do that? And I can give you a small awareness about your CPU. So you know that in a computer, CPU is a main device which is controlling all your devices. Okay, well, fine. So CPU is nothing, it's known as central processing unit. So what is inside that CPU? A CPU contains a control unit, CU, and an ALU, arithmetic logic unit. So control unit actually processes all your text like alphabets. Your ALU processes your numbers, that is arithmetic logic unit. Fine. So what happens if you get a message like ALU failure? You cannot calculate anything, any numbers. So ultimately what happens is you'll have to replace your CPU. Fine. So what we are going to learn here is, if you have any issue in your CPU, so you are learning to a technician, you are meeting a technician or giving a call to a technician, and he is attending your service call and he is informing that you have to replace your CPU. Fine. So what we are going to learn here is, if he is going to replace a CPU, he says I want to replace the CPU. If it is around 3 to 4 years before you have purchased, what happens is that CPU might be, it won't be available in the market. So he will tell you can replace more faster CPU so that it works better and you'll have warranty. And the CPU which is worn out can't be replaced because it is not available in the market. So he'll give you a suggestion. So what we have to do and what you have to take up the idea is, what is the type of CPU you want to ask him. So example, you know that a CPU started from 8088 and it was given to public. Before it was used only for scientific research and army. So from 1978 it was given to public. By the time it came to India it was 80s. Fine. So it started from 8088, 286, 386 processor, 486 processor, then Pentium 1, Pentium 2, Pentium 3, Pentium 4. After 1.1 gigahertz it was known as P4. Then we have i3, i5 and i7 processors. So nowadays they use i3, i5 or i7. Why so many changes in processor? Because as application what they have programmed or designed, so they need a faster bandwidth. So accordingly, example, when you're going in a cycle it is slower. So what you planned, try to buy, you purchased a motorbike or a scooter where it goes faster. So when n number of people increases in your family, you go for a car. So same way, when the application, number of application you have to open in different window, so CPU should have the ability to process all the application at a time. And due to this, what happened is there was an improvement in technology. Well, so I don't want to drag you all again in depth about the architecture or the manufacturing unit. So we need to know, if you are going to replace CPU, what is the idea you have to give to the technician. Might be a technician or the store keeper will advise you to take a motherboard. Example, this is a motherboard and this is a CPU slot where you're going to fix it. So in case you have a i3 processor which is worn out, you want to replace processor, but you know what are the generations available in i3, i5 and i7. So it started from first generation, second, fourth, 7th, 8th, then 10th, then 11th. So at present we have 11th generation. But what happens is, if he will tell you, see, instead of going for i3 processor, why don't you go for i5 processor? So i5 processor, what happens? What happens is the bus, the frequency of the processor is different. It is faster. So when you are trying to access your computer, when you are turning on, it will be faster to open a application. Well, but in the same board you had a i3 processor, can I replace a i5 processor? So that's what we want to know about it. So he will say, no sir, we cannot replace in this board the new i3 processor in the higher generation. So he will tell you, or he will recommend you to replace even the motherboard along with the processor. So what we have to do? We have to replace. But when you are replacing, what you need to tell him is, fine, again after 2 to 3 years I do have an issue in the processor and I want to upgrade the processor. Should I change my motherboard? So in that situation, he'll give you a question mark. What you want to do, or what is the best way you want to take up. So you have to tell him, see, I need a motherboard where I can upgrade to i5 instead of i3. So the socket which is LGA 1150 example. So if you have a socket which is LGA 1156, so in that socket you can insert i3 processor as well as i5 processor. So he will say, fine, yes sir, that's the best way. So you buy a board where you buy at present i3 processor, but later on you want to upgrade for i5. It's well and good. You needn't have to buy a motherboard. You'll have to buy only the processor. Well, you're clear about it. So when you're going to replace a processor and you are meeting a technician or you're giving a call to technician and he's confirming that you have to replace your processor, he will ask you to replace the motherboard also, even if it is not defective, because you won't get the same processor which was 2 to 3 years old. So he'll tell, for that generation processor is not available, so I'll be having a new generation processor which the processor won't suit in this socket. So ultimately what happens, you'll have a two cost. One is for motherboard, another is for CPU. So in that situation you can forecast the future. So what you can say, might be again 2 to 3 years if I'm using extensively the CPU systems computer. So again there is a chance of wear and tear, just like your tire which is in a vehicle has a first wear and tear. So same here. So what we have to do is, fine, I'm replacing i3 processor now. In the future, if I have to replace i5 processor, kindly get me that board. Well, are you clear about it? Okay. So what are the types of processor available? You have an Intel processor as well as AMD processor. So AMD is nothing, American miniature device. Intel, it's a separate company. So these companies have two different manufacturers for CPU. So what's the difference? Both are similar. Okay, nothing much different. So it depends on your cost. Like example, you say I do have a car which is 800cc, but I need to go faster. What happens? You go for a higher cc car, like 1500cc car. So ultimately what happens? That is faster. So same here, if you want to replace processor along with the motherboard, see that you go for a motherboard which in the future you can upgrade to higher end processor. Example, from i3 to i5 or i7. Fine. Well, so this is all about it today. So I need to give you a small class about how to upgrade your processor. So processor, regarding this processor, what I'm going to tell you is, you have an option like what processor you have purchased a motherboard and processor, you have renewed it, or you bought a new computer which they say this computer is having an i3 processor or i5 processor or i7. How do I look into it? How do I look into it? Like, how can I view that this processor is installed in my computer? Fine. What you have to do is turn on your computer, click on the start, go to the system menu, have a right click on it, or open that system. If it is an 8.1 OS or 10, you can see that. Then you'll see a page opening and it will show you processor type. Okay, let me show you about it. Well, I'm on my Windows screen. So here at the left bottom, give a right click, you'll be able to see a pop-up window. Select system, okay, you're able to view the page. So I'm able to see the processor here. So it says device specification, device name, then processor. So I have in this laptop a processor known as AMD and the speed is 1.50 gigahertz. So this is how you can identify the processor which you bought it, and you can confirm like what processor, as he said, is fixed in it. Below that you have a memory which we'll see in your memory class. Well, is it clear for you? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Keep going. Have a wonderful day ahead.